And coming in at number 10, stiff collars. This early 1900s invention was accidental by nature, but seems absolutely painful just hearing about it. The detachable collar or stiff collar, created by Hannah Montague in New York in 1827, has been coined the father killer. But why? Well, this stiff detachable collar is so stiff that men could die from just wearing it. Yeah, basically just rubbing your jugular up against it all day would restrict oxygen to the brain. You could pass out or even die. This man was killed by a collar! So basically your own collar is rear naked choking the shit out of you all day. I thought the tie was the worst part. Made out of usually a separate material to the shirt pinned onto, the removable, starched to absolute hell and back collar basically turns as a sharp and rigid on your neck as a knife. Pain is beauty, darling. Apparently men would fall asleep after a couple of drinks or succumb to a catnap and sometimes not even wake up at all. Dressed to death. Literally.
Number 9. Mini bowler hats. Ah yes, are you tired of bowler hats fitting on your head properly? Are you stuck in the 1940s and you're now tired of regular sized, properly fitting bowler hats? Well, fear not, old heads. Introducing mini bowler hats. Yep, that right there is fashion right there, folks. Take something that's already working and then just jazz it up, just mess it up just a little bit. This look didn't last too long because only a few could pull it off, obviously. The hat wouldn't fit on your head. That was the whole point. A hat that isn't supposed to fit. It was always sideways and like dainty, it was kind of half off. Any swift breeze comes along, good game, the hat's gone. Now you're chasing a mini bowler hat down the road like it's a silent film.
Whoa, oops, sorry, my hat.
Harper's Bazaar deemed the mini bowler hat one of the worst of the 1940s. Yeah, I see a lot of hats now that aren't on all the way. Drives me nuts. I just wanna put it on. It's always like about to flap off. I'm like, you're gonna lose it, man. The wind's gonna come, you're gonna lose that hat. It's a nice hat. Number 8, no spitting. Spitting was a common habit back in the Old West. You see it in movies and parodies. They're always spitting on the ground and stuff. Well, it's because it's real. It's a real fact right there. It wasn't officially outlawed. However, many towns and cities did prohibit spitting on sidewalks and inside of public buildings because, yeah, please don't do that. Thank you so much, sir. This was largely due to concerns about hygiene and, of course, like I said earlier, the spread of disease. In addition, spitting was considered rude and uncivilized behavior. Yeah, of course, and many people were offended by it. Middle of conversation, guy just spits in between your feet. I'm like, wait, don't do that. Please don't do that ever again. Some businesses even had signs asking customers to not spit on the floor. Can you imagine what kind of shithole you're in? You have to ask people not to do that. There was also social norms in place that discouraged spitting in certain situations. For example, it was considered impolite to spit in the presence of a woman or in formal settings, which, yeah, I agree, still do that today. That's great. Despite these efforts to discourage spitting, it remained a common practice among cowboys, miners, and other workers in ye old west. They're like, yeah, I have shit in my mouth. I don't know, we don't have water. I'm gonna spit. Sorry. Number 7, communal towels. Ugh, this one's so rough. It's exactly what you think it is. It was a ride. Today we have paper towels that you pump like 13 times just to get a little sheet. Or sometimes, if you're lucky, that Dyson air drying thing where you just dip your hands in for like 13 seconds and then it's done. You're like, oh, the future is here. That's always fun, that one. Back in the Old West, communal towels were often used in public restrooms and other shared spaces. Yeah, just one towel for all. Just to dap off everything that's wet or damp back then. Ew. These towels were usually made of cloth and hung on a rack for multiple people to use just in public, like it's your bathroom. While this may seem unhygienic by our modern standards now, it was a common practice at the time. So yeah, I don't know, we can laugh a bit, I guess. People were generally less concerned about the spread of germs and diseases back then, and communal towels were convenient and they were a cost-effective option for public spaces. However, with the rise of awarenesses about hygiene and germs and all that nasty stuff, the use of these towels eventually fell out of favor in the earliest 20th century. Thank God. Imagine dapping off your lips after eating some wings with a communal towel. Some cowboy just, and then and then you come in and wipe your, that's so gross. Number 6, hair care? Yeah, I added a question mark there because, I don't know, not much TLC going on top back then. Throughout history, people have used a variety of natural ingredients for hair care. Nowadays, guys have it too easy. It's like Axe 5-in-1 It's like hair, armpits, legs, feet, all like, no way you can do all of that. Popular methods in the Old West were whiskey and castor oil. Yep, all on your big exposed head, right in the sun, there you go. Pantene Pro V wasn't a thing then, so folks were rubbing their heads clean with castor oil. That's a nightmare. Whiskey was believed to help cleanse the scalp and often promote hair growth, while the castor oil, that option, that was thought to moisturize and condition the hair. So that'd be a fun 2-in-1 back then. That's great, put that in the stocking. These ingredients were readily available and most importantly, they were affordable, making them popular, but also realistically, it was their only option. Guy's doing whiskey, he's like, yeah, let's clean it up, clean up top. It's so hot. It's like, ugh, really burns. Number 5, medical shows. Today, medical shows, they're fascinating. Dr. Pimple Popper, I'll watch that all day while I eat. I don't even care, I'm disgusting like that. Dude's getting mashed potatoes squeezed out of their back, so I'm like, let's go, I love it. I'm slapping that thumbs up, it's my shit. Back in the Wild West, the 1860s, the 1890s, you know, they had what's called medicinal showmen. These are, what an absolute joke, what a con. These guys would go town to town selling elixirs and tonics, everything one needs to live a happy and comfortable Western life, but they were full of lies. None of this shit is true. These professional medicinal showmen would have pawns run ahead and plant themselves in the audience before these random demonstrations of amazing medical elixirs, right? These shows, bunch of bullshit. They would call up random audience members, that guy that ran ahead, and then use one of these elixirs and magically treat their ailment on the spot in front of the public, right? Almost as if it was a magic show. One of the most successful of these elixirs was the elixir made from John Healy and Charles Bigelow. It was a mixture of herbs, roots, and animal fat, said to treat any and all illness, but in reality, it was just an extremely strong laxative. So yeah, if you're gonna take it, make sure you're close to home. Yuck. Number 4, bad bartenders. When we think of old saloons, old West saloons with the swinging doors and stuff, a few catchphrases and a cowboy with some whiskey, all that good stuff, the bartender back then would pour a drink, the cowboy would take the bottle instead. So illegal. Sir, that's that, please put that back. Back in the wild, wild Western days, grabbing a drink at the bar wasn't like that at all. It wasn't like anything you see in the movies. It sucked. Bartenders, they had no regulations to follow behind that dirty bar. But not only was it very high proof, but some bevies like tarantula juice would just poison you. It was literal poison. If its name didn't tip you off, it was literally made with poisonous ingredients, because that's how cowboys did it back then, with their hairs. I don't know. Tarantula juice was made from strychnine. If you drink it, you're gonna feel like there's tarantulas crawling all over your skin. That was their pitch back then. They're like, happy hour, come get tarantula juice. I'm like, awesome, thank you so much. How do I not tip? Which button do I press to not give you money, you freak? Number 3, grow it out. In the Old West era of the United States, men often grew their hair long as a practical choice rather than a cool fashion statement. You know what I mean? All those bandits with their long hair, they had to. Living in the rugged and often isolated terrain of the West, men had to perform many physically demanding tasks like hunting, ranching, mining, pouring whiskey drinks and tarantula juice. Long hair would help protect their scalp and neck from the sun and wind and all that good stuff. But it's important to note that haircuts were not always easily accessible back then. And many men back then could not afford them or did not have access to a barber. It's like, I can't cut it. It's like, where? We don't have anything. We don't have dental. What do we do? As a result, growing their hair long became a practical and functional choice for many men back in the Old West rather than, style. They were going for looks back then. They weren't doing man buns, doing the cowboy thing. They're like, no, I have bugs. I don't want you to see my bugs. I'm gonna grow it, thanks. Number 2, outhouses. This one here stinks. In the Wild West, outhouses were sadly common as indoor plumbing was not yet available. Didn't think of that yet. So these structures were often simple and consisted of a small building, if you want to call it that, with a hole in the ground for your waste disposal, if you want to call it that. Now, due to the unsanitary conditions and lack of proper waste management and knowledge about germs and stuff, outhouses could attract a variety of insects and other pests, and it was just bad to go in there. Flies, mosquitoes, other bugs, they were commonly found in and around these structures, and they could potentially transmit diseases to humans. So if you're in there, you really get your business done and then get out. You don't want to waste time. You're not checking any tweets while you're in there, that's for sure. Despite the unsanitary conditions of an outhouse, they were a necessary part of daily life in the Wild West. And people learned to tolerate the bugs and just deal with it because they're like, you know what, this is better than going on outside. Whatever's going on out there, we're good. Close that up. One time I went to a cottage when I was younger and my mom didn't tell me that they had only an outhouse. No running water the entire week. I was like, awesome, let's turn around, I guess. I'm not doing that. I held it for like 7 days straight. It was a nightmare. And finally, number 1, broken bones. I'm lucky enough to have never broken a bone. I mean, knock on all the woods. But what if you did back in the old Western days, right? Then what would happen? But is a cowboy gonna heal you up? No. What if you were trying to learn a kickflip and you broke your leg? Then what? What are you gonna do? If the dental plan was any indication, it's not pretty, not a lot of options. In the Old West, broken bones were a common occurrence, particularly among those who worked in physically demanding jobs, like ranchers, miners, cowboys, around livestock. Those things kicking you randomly, something's gonna break. Treatment options were limited and often relied on first aid techniques, splinting the affected area with whatever materials were available, such as wood, cloth, or even animal hides. It sounds crazy, but back then that was really the only method for immobilizing broken bones. Pain relief, that was only provided with natural remedies, such as opium or willow bark tea, so you're gonna feel that entire healing process. It's gonna suck. More serious fractures, like ones that, go through the skin, those require the attention of a doctor or a surgeon. However, those medical professionals back then were not always available in the remote areas of the Wild West.
Number 10, Chopins. These ancient slippers-ish shoes were used for more than just throwing at the heads of your unruly teenagers. Imagine catching a hardwood 14-inch Chopin across your butt, thrown at you like a 90-mile fastball. Solid wood too. Just a huge block, just originally worn and seen on the women in the 15th and 16th and 17th century Italy and France. These huge platform heels were designed for sliding over your shoes and socks to keep them dry and clean from the mud and the muck. Rule of thumb was, higher the Chopin, higher the class. Most of the time, these platform shoes are so high that you would need an assistant just to help you get around. Yeah. No, I don't. I want to go this way, please. Thank you. Walking all over the place like Gene Simmons, 14 feet high. Great way to roll your ankle. Sometimes embroidered or lined with gems and jewels, these shoes were purely decorative and pretty impractical, as you can see. No one's walking up a spiral staircase in those things. No thanks. Number 9, head cones. Egyptologists have decoded the 14th century BCE paintings about these mysterious caps worn on the heads of certain women in ancient Egypt. First assumed it was of religious or ceremonial wear and tear, researchers and archaeologists think that they've cracked the code finally. It's actually a big wad of sticky beeswax. Yeah, but it smells nice. A perfume. This ball of specific gunk sat under the cap, sitting on the crown of the head that under the sun over the course of the day would cleanse the body with pleasant smells. Mostly stuffed with either beeswax or animal fat and then packed with your favorite pleasant smelling herbs and flowers. The cap would then slowly melt on top of your head and would just drip down into the hair and down the body all day, slowly releasing a cologne shampoo hybrid sort of thing. Some were even stuffed with essential oils for the skin, and it wasn't just putting in fennel on your head at the end of the day, huh? That's nice. As of now, researchers have only been able to find women wearing these deodorant hats and paintings and carvings, and have yet to find a man wearing these ancient eau de toilettes. Ah yes, the scent of a man. Ladies, look over here. And now here. I smell disgusting.
Power of a wooden comb. The most popular materials were the sleekish stones like jade, polished gold, but most of all, boxwood. It's naturally oily, so the combs are anti-static, avoid breakage, and are gentle on the scalp. Traditionally, boxwood combs would have been created from trees only after they've turned 35 years old. The wood is harvested in August or September when the weather is hot but the humidity is low. Then it's dried for 3 years. The process from start to finish can take up to 60 steps, and the Japanese government officially recognizes close to 200 traditional national industries, and comb making tops the list to this day. Traditionally, women would be given a set of these combs when they married. They are used to create every possible hairstyle, from a slick back top knot of sumo wrestlers to the perfectly precise updo of a geisha. Even to this date, every 20 years, boxwood combs are sent to the Ise Shrine in Japan, where they're ritually burned in sacrifice to the sun goddess. But there's more to it than just the comb. It's all in the Tsubaki sauce. In Japan, Tsubaki oil was used for thousands of years as a cooking and machine oil. However, on Oshima Island, the women who harvested the oil were noticed to have long, beautiful hair and radiant, clean skin. Naturally, they'd been using the oil harvested from the Tsubaki nuts on their hair and skin since it was all over their hands from working. This news flew, and suddenly far and wide, Japanese women started using Tsubaki for beauty purposes. Science time! Tsubaki oil contains a very high level of oleic acid, which will control the water loss while making your hair softer and more pliable and minimize shedding. Linoleic acid in the oil stimulates hair growth, maintains healthy healthy scalp conditions and improves moisture retention. Tsubaki oil is non-greasy and an excellent all-around moisturizer for hair and skin. Its excellent emollient properties keep skin and hair supple, and Tsubaki also features prominently in the art of traditional pattern Japanese designs. Dating back since the 11th century, they're called wagara, where it became popular in the motif of the Meiji period. Red, white, and black. The country's flag is one shade short from matching the most traditional makeup palette there is. The old Japanese proverb, white skin covers 7 flaws, describes the obsession Japanese women had for fair skin throughout the centuries. This dates back to the Nara period in 710, when Japanese culture was heavily influenced by Chinese and Korean culture. During the Heian period, Japanese beauty aesthetics shifted away from imitation. They continued to apply the white powder to their faces, but then they started plucking eyebrows and repainting them higher, and then they blackened their teeth. By early Edo, aka the 1600s, the red, white, and black color palette was in effect. Red lip rouge and fingernail polish, white face powder, and black teeth and eyebrow pencils. Pigments were produced from fresh safflowers, became so expensive it was said to even be worth its weight in gold. During the 1800s, women began to focus more on the health of their skin rather than just the appearance. A beauty manual published in 1813 described desirable skin as being moist and naturally colored. In the late 19th century, the women's suffrage movement began to take hold across Japan. As women began to advocate for protection against oppressive patriarchal practices, the concerns for beauty began to change, and workplaces and schools began to drop requirements for makeup. And finally, from the 1980s, beauty started to move away from emulating the West. More Japanese women were able to represent their own Japanese identity internationally. Models like Yamaguchi Sayoaka, who made it onto the international scene, served as inspiration for young Japanese women to embrace their own beauty. But I know I can't breeze by something I'd mentioned, so Uhaguro is next. As mentioned in the Heian period, yes again because they were the hygiene and beauty trend-setting period of Japan, Japanese beauty products broke free and created a distinct aesthetic of their own. This included the long straight hair, white powdered face, yada yada, and an unusual beauty ideal, the blackened teeth called Uhaguro. Now, it's usually done for the first time during puberty to celebrate maturity and growing beauty for women. Not to mention the charcoals used for it are incredibly good for your teeth. During Heian, purely black items were considered pure and beautiful, and people wanted to imitate that as much as possible. What's new about that? Make it the motto for the Kardashian family. Teeth as black as night were seen as beautiful and remained popular as a beauty ideal until the 19th century. Many Westerners who visited Japan described the practice as repugnant because the Japanese custom disfigured the women by making them intentionally unattractive. Naturally, Westerners didn't even see their women as human beings, just walking baby machines, so they couldn't wrap their pea brains around the concept. A woman's appearance is not always about or for them. Many still can't in modern times. However, many Japanese girls were allowed a relatively large degree of both social and sensual liberty. This social ritual is a celebration of the determination of mature women. And while we're on the topic of teeth, how about dental ablation and avulsion? It's hygiene, it's beauty, it's the deliberate taking out of teeth. 3 birds, 1 stone. In Jomon culture in the Japanese archipelago, dating back 13,000 years to 23 years BP, practiced this ritual extensively for ceremonial purposes and during rites of passage. 90% of their population had extracted upper and lower canines and lower incisors, usually when the recipients were between late teens and early 20s. Tooth ablation is explained by the archipelago belief that the body is a physical symbol of membership in social community. It can be shaped by and contributes to its environment. Like how seasons change and tides turn, we evolve. Changes in social environment can affect patterns and choices of body modification. As the mouth is the primary social organ, teeth are one of the most visible parts of the body that can display change and thus be treated through some form of modification, chipping, filling, whatever your choice. In layman's terms, life milestones were commemorated by the extraction of different tooth classes. With a flash of a smile, one would know about the individual's family, if they were an adult or not, if they were married, if they had experienced the death of a loved one, or if they had any children. There was no need to ask because your body openly displayed your identity. Pretty cool, right? Since we're on a roll with teeth, let's dive into body modification. A section about Japanese people in the Records of the Three Kingdoms, written by Chinese bureaucrat Chen Shao in the late 3rd century, describes how the men of Wa, which is the oldest recorded name for Japan, tattooed their faces and painted their bodies in pink and scarlet. The tradition derived from how they decorated their bodies in order to protect themselves from large fish when diving underwater for food. Tattoos were also present in the indigenous Ainu of Hokkaido and the natives of Okinawa. The women of Ainu, a tribe considered descendants of the Chopin people bore tattoos around their mouths and the back of their hand. The mustache-shaped tattoo around the lips holding symbolic purposes of warding off evil spirits and indicating readiness for marriage and assuring a woman's place in the afterlife. On the southernmost Ryukyu Islands, women had the backs of their hands and fingers tattooed to ward off bad luck and get along with their mothers-in-law. The logic being that any woman who can endure that pain could also endure that of having a mother-in-law that annoying. These indigenous Japanese tattoo cultures were outlawed during the Meiji period, however, making this art form a vanishing tradition. To protect heritage, you can actually get these tattoos for free on Oshima Island. Every culture found its way to reuse and reduce. The tosu is an important aspect of the Zen tradition and counted among the Shichidogaran, the 7 indispensable buildings found at every Zen complex. 3 of these structures, tosu included, are referred to collectively as the Sanmuku Duo, aka the 3 silent halls. See, they can put rules like that in because nobody in that place was eating Taco Bell at 2 a.m., so toilets could be quiet. In earlier times, people in Japan did not consider the toilet to be part of the house. It would always be found in an additional attachment with a specifically designated pair of slippers only meant to be worn while using the toilet. Do not wear them in the house. If you're rich, you had your own. If you're poor, you likely shared with a neighbor. Before the westernization of the country, human waste was tactically used as fertilizers. By emptying number 2 only cesspits, excrement wouldn't seep into subsoil or flush into rivers that fed our drinking supplies, as was done in the West. And the reason the Westerners were dropping like flies from disease or walking infections whenever they traveled. By properly storing, using, and refreshing it as fertilizer, Japanese also upheld crops the Westerners couldn't. But the people who showered once a year were grossed out by it, so the Japanese folks stopped the cess fertilization. They both mean the same thing. It's beard hygiene. In Japan, there's only one word for facial hair, with the exception to eyebrows, and it's hygiene. Could be sideburns, a mustache, a beard. That's the name for those facial hairs. It also happens that the word self-deprecation in Japanese is also pronounced hygiene, so we can already feel the direction this is going. From the medieval period to the beginning of the Edo period, if you were a samurai, you had facial hair as it was a symbol of power that made them appear intimidating, solemn, and dangerous. Those unable to grow these bushy symbols of manliness were shunned and ridiculed, like Japan's second unifier, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who had to crazy glue these things on his face every day. Not kidding, Google it. Then, a little into the Edo period, there was a big switch. It was Japan's period of peace, and suddenly, facial hair was viewed as unbridled sign of aggression. So, 17th century law prohibits even those with the lushest of beards from displaying their grandeur, unless you had a facial scar. So, you can either be babyface, or you can give yourself a cool-ass face scar and grow an epic beard. What you choosing? When overthrown Western fashion came into Japan and beards and mustaches were popular again. Portraits from this era often have the cartoonishly large ones. It doesn't last long though, and clean shaven becomes popular again. So why no beards still today? It's hygiene. Quite literally, yeah, but in a non-literal sense and in our definition of the word. Surveys continue to show Japanese people, particularly women, have the opinion that facial hair is correlated with uncleanliness.
Number 10. Macaroni. The term macaroni took on a whole new meaning in the 1700s. Macaroni was not a delicious lunch, but rather, in this sense, a fashionable and eccentric subculture that emerged in Georgian England. That was my second guess. Love that. Macaronis, plural, so many of them, macaronis were known for their extravagant clothing and, of course, these massive wigs that would make RuPaul herself take a step back. These things were insane. I mean, holy shit, guys. They were the bread and butter of the whole macaroni operation. It's all up top. They thought they were showcasing their cosmopolitan tastes and sophistication by wearing a bug-filled nest. However, the macaroni style was often satirized for how it looked, its exaggerated mannerisms and excessive fashion choices. Definitely easy to make fun of in some sense. And these wigs, by the way, so dirty, impossibly filthy, full of bugs. Hope you like lice. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony. That A before riding, he added that. He wasn't good with syllables. Riding on a pony. I'm on to you, man. Stupid rhyme. It's gonna be stuck in my head all day now. Stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. No. Number 9. Cricaus. Also known as polanes, these slip-ons here were a distinctive style of footwear popular in the late 14th and early 15th centuries. Named after the Polish city of Cricaus, of course, these shoes were characterized by their elongated, pointed toes. It's quite ridiculous. I can't imagine how many people tripped over these shoes. It's insane. The fashion of wearing Cricaus quickly spread throughout Europe, symbolizing social status and wealth, all in the form of that. Okay, sure. we'll buy it, I guess. The exaggerated length of the toes varied, of course, with some reaching extreme lengths that required additional support structures. Yeah, we ruined it immediately. We had to start tying strings to it. That's how big they got. Every guy wanted the longest, thickest shoe, if you know what I mean, and turned it into a joke. Concerns over practicality led to their decline by the mid-15th century, but I ask you, bumblebees, should we bring this back? Forget Uggs, let's pull a Cricaus out this fall. What's up?
Number 8. Urine. Okay, is this just gonna be disgusting the entire time? Well, the answer is yes. History's pretty disgusting. Okay, this one is weird because right when we think we figured it all out, something jarring happens. Like a jar of piss and all the health benefits it had throughout history. I'm sorry, what? Well, at least they thought it did. In ancient Rome, not only was this liquid gold sold for, well, gold, it was often traded as a prominent good, sold for its multitude of healing purposes. You see, people have been using urine for thousands of years. That's right, this destructive, toxic bodily fluid could be repurposed, salvaged into many different topicals and treatments. From hair loss to your daily skincare routine, it was not only great for staining and softening leather made for shoes and clothes, it was a natural teeth whitener and antiseptic. That's right, from ancient Rome to as late as the 20th century, people have been tinkering and tailoring with their pee. Egyptians did it, Greeks did it. Urine is the body's natural antiseptic and was soon turning septic. Like the science behind this alone is what your buddy tells you know what I mean? Oh, rolled ankle? Yeah, just piss on it. Got ghosts? Just pee on it. The ailment for all your needs. Disgusting. Number 7. Teeth. Invented in 1488 by Sir Robert Tooth. Okay, I'm joking. No. Teeth were never officially invented, but what we did for them and how we cared for them had people scratching their heads for the last millennia. We've all had a toothache at some point in our lives, so they must have had them back then. In fact, oral hygiene was utterly disgusting. I didn't brush my teeth after my coffee and I can already feel it. Ew. People's teeth were so bad throughout history that dentists were actually training and teaching each other what to do about the huge toothworm problem. That's right. Imagine worms growing inside your teeth. Well, due to the swelling and pressure, people thought there were actual bugs or evil spirits living within their sore tooth, serving them extreme pain. Nope, just an infection. You need a root canal. Oh, and actual worms and bugs living in the tooth. Yeah, you see this gray area right here? That's a ladybug, right? It's medieval England and things were pretty medieval. Right down to the surgery, and if you had an impacted wisdom tooth, well, that wasn't covered. England, 400 AD. People started this new trend of oral hygiene cleaning, but it wasn't spin brushes and floss, no, more like mint and vinegar. And prayer. Just kind of swoosh it all around in your mouth and wipe your teeth with your shirt and call it another year. If you were lucky enough to rinse your mouth out at the time, then you could have saved yourself a visit to the medieval dentist chair. Well, actually just a slab of rock you sit up against and have a friend who's good at ripping. And there you go, buddy. Hey, wake up. The infection alone from the dirty tools going into your mouth is making me itchy. I feel like my breath stinks more now after I've read this topic. Anybody have any gum? Number 6. Toilet paper. Finally, something we recognize. Invented originally in China in 851 from the Tang Dynasty, these soft fabric sheets were designed for, well, you know what it was designed for, but yes, mostly the emperor's bathroom breaks and soon caught on for the Commonwealth as well. The higher the class, the softer and more luxurious the material. From leather to silk, butts were seeing a kinder, gentler side of hygiene. 2-ply bark versus 4-ply silk. The use of toilet paper throughout Europe is a messy one. Again, wipers and hay and stuff like that. It wasn't until the toilet paper rule created by Joseph Gaiety in 1857 that this hygiene method would solidify and stay for keeps. The classic under versus over is the tale as old as time. You ever want to get into a quick argument at someone's house? Just peek in the loo, see if they're rocking beard or mullet. It's the simplest way to have a know-it-all show you the patent and tell you how to wipe your own ass. Charmin. Number 5. The Great Stink. The what? Oh, no, yeah, I read that right. The Great Stink of 1858 was an event in central London in the summer, during which the hot weather exaggerated and amplified the smell of untreated human waste and gunk that had washed up on both in and on the banks of the River Thames. The problem had been growing for years with an out-of-date technology and overflowing sewage system that emptied directly into the river. The stank was thought to have been the root cause of a number of contagious diseases and 3 outbreaks of cholera before it was agreed upon that a small problem was emerging. You think? Long story short, all the garbage, human waste, bloated bodies were all just washing up around the same time. Hey, I caught one! Oh, that's an arm. Okay. And just cooking in all that sun all day? I know what August feels like, and I've smelt my garage on garbage day, and I can't imagine the smell already in central London at that time. And for people to have complained so much that it was even stinkier, that's absolutely rotten. Number 4, nose gaze. I was just thinking, where are all these inventions and blueprints on how to stop the smell? If you can knit metal into a crop top, you can cover your mouth and nose, can't you? Well, close enough. Nosegays were invented. Basically just big nose plugs one would wear day to day to drown out the smell of absolute filth. Just plug it up and ignore it was their mentality. A makeshift wad of bunched up herbs and flowers shoved up your nose, blocking the nasal cavity from the stank that followed. Just see number 5. A potpourri for each nostril. Would this make things worse? Ignoring the smell? Wouldn't that make it even harder to find out where it's coming from? Nope, just band-aid it. It's gonna disappear on its own. We're humans, we're designed to smell stuff for our own survival. The smell is like what lets us know not to go down there. Whoa, no. Like, wouldn't everything just smell like roses at that point? These people were trying to avoid the stinky streets because that actually meant that's where the infection and disease was actually hanging out. The blind leading the blind. Number 3, flushing. Okay, we're making some ground here. We got toilet paper, we got something for the smell. So now where do we put it? Well, plumbing and flushing wasn't connected to each house like it is today. See, the Greeks and Romans had it down to a science. They built drainage systems and learned from the ancient Mesopotamian people how to exactly deal with the problem of waste. A system of pipes, tubes, and drains. The bathroom problem seemed like an easy solution. Use gravity downhill to dispose of the waste outside the city. And here's the kicker. It can even be reused and repurposed at the end as an irrigation system, further nurturing the farming of crops. No, that's good. No, he's right. And then it disappears and literally goes downhill again. After the Roman Empire had fallen, this European dark sanitation era had begun, and hygiene sort of just slipped away. People weren't really concerned with things like disease and plague, and instead leaned into real science like witchcraft or burning cats for fun. You know, important stuff. It wasn't until about the mid-1850s where people revisited this age-old problem and recreated and did exactly the same thing science we already knew. Things were unnecessarily stinky for way too long. It wasn't until the British colonies started tinkering in Boston around the 1700s that proper piping and toiletry transport was eventually built and catalogued. Thus was born the first sanitation system, again, and we still see it today, thank God. Number 2, disinfectants. How did people exactly know if something was clean or not? They couldn't have just seen the particles back then. Let's hear a chamber pot. Smells clean. People were plugging their noses so they couldn't even smell anything. They couldn't smell if it was clean or not. There certainly wasn't a demand for a fresh lemon scent that we're all used to. This was the birth of some basic antiseptic. Chemists were mixing and matching chemicals, and a new form of cleaning agent was introduced in the 1890s by German chemist science Gustav Ruffs in hopes to rid the country of the overflowing cholera epidemic and seize the spread of germs and the disease. By mixing benzalkonium and hydrogen peroxide, you were left with a chemical compound that would destroy and clean infections on medical patients. Light bulb. Thus leaning towards the direction of an all-purpose surface cleaner, killing bacteria and ridding the area of harmful toxins. And drumroll please, Lysol was created. That's right, the same Lysol we use today. This was a push in the right way for humanity. An easy to use liquid cleaner that would aid disinfecting everything in its way. I've seen the bottle and the Wemyss labels. Must have been even stronger back then too. Hope no one spilled it on themselves in testing. Ooh, ouch, that is a class 1 chemical burn. You're just gonna want to pee on that for 12 to 13 days. And number 1, soap. Finally, the end of all our ailments. Soap. The answer. Well, not really. See, it's been around since the Romans, because they literally did everything before us, and stop bragging, we get it. Made out of animal fats, ash, and mostly lye, these makeshift balls of soap were invented years ago. And then forgotten, and then invented again, and then forgotten again. Cleanliness was loose, remember, and it was almost uncool to believe in science, and it wasn't really until the mass production of this chemical detergent that it really stuck. Soap was predominantly sold, produced, and commercialized in the late 1800s. By this time, scientists were fiddling around with things like Lysol and more chemical compounds, sparking its way to the study of germs. A vital step towards large-scale soap production, and it actually started in 1791, when a French chemist Nicolas Leblanc patented a system for making soda ash from salt, at which point added with animal fat, and there you have it. the slippery bar we're all used to today. The discovery made soap making one of America's fastest growing industries in 1850, and it seemed from then on in it was only up. It's crazy to think that someone at this time, even after soap was invented, were still spit-shining surgical instruments to be cleaned.
Kicking off our list at number 10, seam squirrels. I love squirrels. Being Canadian, we see quite a bit of them. They're a little too friendly for me at times, but they're great. During the Old West era, seam squirrels were, well, not what you think. Personal hygiene was not a priority for many people back then, obviously, and lice infestations were unfortunately quite common. Now, the type of lice that affected people during this time was commonly known as body lice, which is pretty horrible. That could be found in the seams of clothing, hence the term seam squirrels. Yeah, not actually a squirrel at all, it's just body lice. Gotcha. Body lice, of course, was a major problem during the Old West era, and they were responsible for the spread of diseases like typhus, trench fever, and relapsing fever. Relapsing fever? I haven't even heard of that one. That's terrible. These diseases were often fatal because, you know, ye Old West, and many people in the Old West succumbed to them. To combat the spread of lice and the, one of many diseases that they carried, people in the Old West often resorted to extreme measures, such as burning their clothing or even shaving their heads completely. That's why you see old cowboys and they look like they're stressed. They have no hair, their clothes are just gone. You're like, what happened? Lice. Lice happened. Some people also used remedies like vinegar and kerosene to try and kill the lice, so yeah, it was a rough time either way. Overall, lice infestations were a significant health concern during the Old West era, and they played a significant role in the spread of disease. Yeah, it wasn't just rats in the medieval era, it was also lice, which is even grosser in my opinion. Number 9, Old West dental. I could use some Old West dental recently. I'm chewing on one side right now, you know what I mean? In the Old West, dental hygiene was not a priority for everyone. They couldn't afford it. And also, dental care was often very sparse. You couldn't really find it anywhere for that matter. People generally didn't have access to modern dental tools or products, and many did not have regular access to any dentists at any point in their life, which is a sad but real fact. That would suck, I'm terrified. However, there were some basic dental hygiene practices that people in the Old West may have followed to keep their teeth, somewhat in their heads, keep their gums not rotten. Didn't do much, but it did something. There were toothbrushes. Not many, but wasn't as good as Oral-B. There's some stuff. More often than not, you'd have to use twigs or chew on mint, that kind of natural survivor stuff. Some people may have also used a cloth or a rag to rub their teeth clean. Yeah, don't forget your tooth cloth before you go on vacation, I guess. Gotta and then put it back in your pocket. Your old woody teeth, gotta rub those. Access to professional dental care was limited in the Old West. Some towns, some had dentists, but all they did back then was just pull out the problem. They didn't give you a crown. They're like, which one hurts? All right, get out of here. All without anesthesia, so that's a great time. You're gonna remember all of it. Other options included a community toothbrush, which is hilarious to think about and also so sad. Yeah, some public establishments had a public toothbrush. Can you imagine? Go out, have a little brush, check your teeth. All right, cool. And then go back to the bar. I'm gonna be sick. I'm gonna actually throw up right now.
Number 8, the Gall Dress. Well, Marie Antoinette was not around during the Victorian era, living and dying just before it began really. Her presence was felt in regards to the mark that she left on the fashion scene. Marie Antoinette was often seen as a woman of scandal, not just because of the stories of her love affairs and her actually being misquoted here as responding to the poor, starving people of France by saying let them eat cake, but also because of her fashion sense. While by today's standards, Marie Antoinette would be seen as probably being overdressed among us, by her time standards, she was often seen as presenting herself as immoral, with many of her dresses resembling more undergarments of the day than the usual more modest finery and typical style. Case in point, a portrait that was done in her chemise style dress, known as a Gall, by painter Vigée Lebrun, was condemned for how it portrayed the monarch. People actually admired Lebrun's work in terms of the painting itself, but didn't like the dress that she had painted the queen in, as they felt it appeared too intimate and informal. As a result, the painting was actually removed from display, and Vigée was forced to repaint Marie Antoinette's dress into something more formal and fitting, because it's too risque. We were like, we can't look at the queen like this, it looks terrible, repaint it. I don't know why I'm making everyone British when we're in France, but there you go. Number 7, fainting room. By today's standards, fainting rooms might seem quite scandalous, and while they were very fashionable back in the day, often being linked to corsets, at least so we think. In reality, fainting rooms actually had less to do with corsets and more to do with people's desires to nap without having to bother with all the business of undressing, getting in bed, getting back up, having the bed remade, and completely redressing. Instead, fainting rooms were a place where you could sneak off to for some peace and quiet during a busy afternoon or major social event, or simply a place you could just go to rest for a bit without having to do the whole sleep time ritual that usually accompanied, going to bed. What's more scandalous is the fact that the women who were known to actually faint back in the day, that is true, and even today women still faint, people still faint, had this malady attached to corsets by physicians. Usually, of course, men back in the day who simply just didn't know what was wrong with these women to make them faint so much. So what did they do? They blamed corsets, of course. Although to be fair, corsets are notoriously bad for your health. But still, I just love that these doctors were like, I don't know what's wrong with this woman. Corsets, they make her faint, that's what it is. Probably iron deficiency, heat, being overdressed in the heat, there's a lot of reasons why people faint. Number 6. Scheele's Green. This dye color became super popular in the Victorian era, but is also known for being literally made out of poison. If you're worried that women of the day didn't know that at the time, nah, they were actually informed on this, yet they still chose to wear this color because, it was simply too gorgeous. Hey, it's worth it. A little bit of arsenic poisoning, no problem. It did cause symptoms of arsenic poisoning among those who wore the dresses dyed with this color because it's dye, this fabric is still rubbing up against your skin, still getting absorbed through your pores, but it actually caused even more harm to those who made and dyed the garments with it. Because they're the ones actually breathing that in and stuff. Yikes. Number 5. Bloomers. Bloomers were one of the first styles of pants women gravitated towards in the Victorian era. They were worn in rebellion of the often unruly skirts of the day, which made it hard to move around and, honestly probably do anything. Female cyclists instead preferred to wear bloomers, causing much scandal as people felt it was improper for women to dress so masculinely. How dare you. Basically, bloomers are like more floofy pants is how I would describe them, and people felt that pants should be reserved for men to wear. Even the floofy ones. They were like, women can't have any pants, not even floofy pants. I gotta say, I would totally rock some Victorian era bloomers and be causing all the scandals myself if I were around back then. They definitely look more comfy than pretty much almost everything else women were wearing. The bloomers got their name from a prominent American feminist of the time, Amelia Bloomer, though she herself did not invent them, but she was a person that basically spoke out and was like, why can't women wear pants? Although Amelia Bloomer did fight hard for women's rights, she herself is not someone I believe we should just straight up glorify, to be clear. She also said some pretty terrible things about Native Americans, and she also seemed to be content with civilians taking the law into their own hands and literally hanging people deemed undesirable in their community, so it's a big yikes from me. Number 4. Corset. Corsets didn't originate in the Victorian era, but they definitely became iconic in regards to the fashion of that time period. That's because slim waists, they came back into fashion, baby. They also became iconic for the fact that they were causing great damage to the people wearing them. While I too do love to don a corset from time to time, it is important to make sure that you don't push it when you're wearing them, and it's important to remember that this extreme form of shapewear literally has a history of moving people's insides around as a result of wearing them daily or even just regularly. Honestly, even me wearing it every now and then is not good for you. Just corsets aren't good for you. So even just wearing a corset, every now and then, it's not good. Probably shouldn't do it. I probably shouldn't do it, but am I gonna do it? Yeah, probably. And even back in the Victorian era when they were trending again, we knew that corsets were bad for you. And it made this item quite the risque one, despite it at the time being coveted and widely used by many out there. That was actually even a topic back then. People were like, shouldn't people be wearing these? This seems dangerous. Number 3, flashing. Some ankle. Can't see it on camera, I can't show it to you because it'd be too scandalous. So scandalous. As silly as this sounds now, especially with it being summer right now, as I'm talking about this, a time when being underdressed is really just being comfortable. This was, in fact, a huge thing in the Victorian era. Women were often covered head to toe from the top of the neck all the way down to the ankles. It was common for women to even wear multiple long skirts and stockings in an attempt to just fully cover their legs and ankles. So those who decided to flash a little bit of ankle with their fashion choices, woo! They were considered quite risque. Number 2. Hoop skirts. As deadly as they were definitely fashionable during part of the Victorian era. The hoop skirt, also known as caged crinoline, was a type of skirt that was built like a cage. There's various different ones which were made out of different materials, but the idea is it's literally a big hoop cage that you wear and then you put a dress over top of that, or a skirt over top of that. The idea was to add volume to the bottom of your outfit, which would also help to make your waist look even slimmer. Something that was very fashionable back in the day and something still coveted by many in regards to modern beauty standards today. Hoop skirts though were deadly because you would often misjudge the size of your skirt, which could cause all kinds of accidents. Also, many of the materials used to build the hoop skirts and dresses that went over top were very flammable. Many people died from catching fire or getting their skirts caught in machinery or even carriage wheels. So yeah, don't wear a hoop skirt if you have to do anything, or be near flames, or just be alive in the Victorian era because there were open flames like everywhere. Number 1. The one piece. I like that I saved this one for number 1. I didn't realize I was doing that, but I knew. Subconsciously. The one-piece swimsuit created quite the controversy when it came into fashion near the end of the Victorian era, and the really wild thing is it initially pretty much covered almost like your entire body. But, and it's a big but for this era, it was very fitted. So because it hugged the body, as swimwear really should do so that you can, actually swim, it was considered to be quite scandalous. Not only that, but of course the one piece also wanted to maintain your modesty by not having your skirt float up in the water around you, giving everyone potentially a free show. So it was fashioned to be pants, Oh boy, a woman in pants without a skirt? Scandalous. How dare these women try to swim?
Our story first begins with Shinto, which had purification rituals required before prayer, such as sweeping and washing. 6th century, Buddhism is introduced, and the casting aside of all impurities, which is part of that, can be done by bathing, washing away the 7 ailments while simultaneously taking on the 7 blessings. Bathing culture changed in the Edo period as Sentos brought bathhouses to commoners' daily lives. Before, they were only able to soak in the river. Baths in this period were steaming waters, with the bather often only soaking the lower part of their legs and washing water upwards. Late Edo period also brought Sufuro, which is the first bath in which bathers would actually submerge to the shoulders. Men and women were also sharing the same bath, and it was commonplace for bathhouses to be mixed. Something that freaked good old Commodore Matthew Perry right out when he visited Japan between 1853 and 54. Nudity doesn't always have to be primal, dude. Onsen, or hot springs, is a public bath in Japan that uses hot spring water to clean and relax your body, which has an endless list of health benefits from the mineral-rich water. In the Showa period starting in 1926, more residential buildings with internal baths were built, and home baths became the new norm. However, still feel free to visit one of the many onsens and sentos that still exist in Japan. From the bottom to the top, let's talk hair care. Long, beautiful, shiny hair, and the Japanese believed each strand carried spiritual energy, ritualizing hair but also how to groom it. Women in ancient Japan believed that as the comb passed through, it would gather each strand's spiritual energy. One of the most famous works from the Heian period was the Tale of Genji. It talks about the traditional Japanese beauty and hair care. It detailed using a fine comb and how important it was to have this long, straight black hair for Japanese women, and even men at the time. All women seemingly had this Rapunzel goal, and no art was depicted showing otherwise. Aristocratic women often achieved hair lengths that reached the floor if not past. In order to keep their hair super straight and shiny, Japanese women had one effective hair care routine. The secret? Combing. Japanese women often combed their hair right up to 5 times a day. And while we're on this subject, how about the
Number 8. Big ol' hats for the ladies. Where the 1900s saw hats growing upwards, the 1910s saw hats growing outwards. These new hats had unusually wide brims and were designed in a way that allowed them to rest on the skull at a tilt. At the same time, short hair was becoming just as popular thanks to one Irene Castle. And as a result, both trends neatly intersected and ended up accommodating each other quite nicely. Some of these designs ranged from simple and neat to just outright bizarre. It's like there was a competition to stuff the top of the head with as much feathers, bells, and whistles as they could. As a result, these strange hats have become deeply iconic as a part of women's fashion for the time. And while they did eventually get reined back in, there are some absolutely bananas designs that you would even think would make Napoleon blush. Number 7. Bowler hats. For men's fashion, nothing was more indicative of the time than the bowler hat. While it was originally created in the 1840s, these hats rose to prominence against stiff competition from the top hats, which we all knew were fighting an up hat battle. Fedoras were still, fortunately, a ways away from becoming the saddest thing to grace the human eye, and so the bowler hat found a nice little niche for itself to rule quite comfortably from. A symbol of the city man, the bowler hat became synonymous with both the time period and the working man, and has remained something of a time-stamped staple ever since. Like, come on, you've seen Charlie Chaplin, the dude was born in a bowler hat. Number 6. Makeup trends. At the turn of the century, makeup was just beginning to become a little bit more accepted culturally, which led to a slow increase in its modern application. In particular, paleness had become something of the accepted norm, which women would attempt to achieve through the consumption of lemon juice or, just the direct application of it to the face, probably in the eyes. The idea of appearing youthful was gaining major traction, and demands were met with an increase in beauty salons, but over-application was still harshly criticized. Number 5. Mourning clothes. In wartime, it was common to suddenly learn of the passing of a family member or relative, and with funds strained, the process of going through the mourning ritual became more streamlined. While general rules did determine the length of mourning depending on the closeness of relations, ranging from several weeks to half a year, the actual rules of propriety regarding clothes worn was quite simple. It's gotta be black. As a result of this, it became commonplace to just simply dye everyday clothes black in place of breaking the bank on new mourning clothes, as it was likely to experience more than 1 or 2 deaths a year. Number 4. The straightening of dresses. As fashion moved onward, the common shape of the dress was actively reconsidered. Orientalism, their words, not mine, became the center of focus for a number of styles. The designer Paul Poiret being credited for its implementation into Western style. While the morality of this remains to be seen, it was generally responsible for moving styles away from the outwardly flowing dresses and drawing them inwards, in direct contrast to the hats. On that topic, turbans were actually also slowly making their way into popularity alongside this, though it should be clear that the majority of these decisions were made purely with the goal of just changing the common aesthetic, with little regard given for the actual cultural significance of the style. Even so, the impact was clear, and what was poofy was on its way to becoming slim. Number 3. Flora Sands. Not so much a trend, just more of an interesting observation. As women's fashion began to grow more masculine, the change in fashion made masculine clothes more desirable as a result. Coinciding with this was the military career of Flora Sands, who served in the Royal Serbian Army during World War I. As women weren't particularly common in the army, she was actually the first one, she struggled to make her way to the front, eager to join the fighting in lieu of working as a nurse. Finally enrolled as a private, she worked her way up in the military, becoming a captain. Now, interestingly enough, while attending a royal event of some sort, a member of the royal family was quoted as observing Sands and stating that she wished she could wear clothes like hers. Number 2. Radium hair tonic. I wish I was joking. One of the downsides of haphazardly clinging to the ideas of progress as an all-encompassing good can be found in the world's slow realization of the precise dangers of radioactive materials. Prior to this, workers were made to handle radioactive materials with their bare hands, most famously the radium clock painters. While not dangerous to the customer, prolonged exposure of the mostly female work staff led to extreme illness and, in most cases, death. But before that horror story came to light, some dude actually tried to sell this as a hair tonic. Seriously, make your hair glow for $5. How many people actually bought this product was unknown, but it is clear that after the effects of of the clocks were made public, the product was subtly pulled from shelves. Number 1. The Hobble Skirt. This is easily the strangest trend of the time, and a result of the aforementioned slimming of dresses. Apparently inspired by a Wright brothers demonstration where a woman was flown as a passenger from their plane. For decency's sake, she tied a rope around her ankles to keep her dress from billowing all over the place. And one designer, Paul Poiret, got an idea. This resulted in a design which would eventually develop into the pencil skirt, but mostly just ended up with women falling off of bridges and drowning. This actually happened to Ida Goyette in 1911, and earlier, a woman who was wearing that skirt was unable to avoid a loose horse on a racetrack, which trampled her to death. One of the lighter jokes that was due to the hobble skirt was that women would apparently compete in hobble skirt-based races, and Paul Poiret would later be quoted shamefully admitting that he had freed the bust and shackled the legs.
And coming in at number 10, baths. From bath bombs to jacuzzis, when did people exactly start warming up that cold river water to sit in for some R&R? Well, apparently the Romans were the first to think about warming her up. I don't really know if they had it in mind that warm water works better and faster to clean and rid of microparticles and had more of a mentality, but one way or another they did it. Were they really ahead of their time though? The first bathhouses have been discovered in Rome approximately being built somewhere in the 2nd century BC, the first of its kind, from a river of cold water to the abundance of over 500 steaming prominent bathhouses. You could pamper yourself head to toe for a small price, small enough so that even the poorest could bathe. That's a lot of small business owners. Hottest water in town, step right up, step right up. The Romans came up with an idea to build a spa house thing which could be flooded and heated by the floor beneath it. With a giant fireplace inside the spa, it was lit by hand and blown through the vents under the floor. Damn, they were smart, huh? Hot and steamy and good for the body. And clean. Well, cleaner. The bathhouse was a technology of its own, and it seemed like humanity was headed in the right direction. No, they were not. Number 9. Wiping. Do as the Romans did. It's thought that these people thought of literally everything before us. Oh yeah? How about pogo sticks? Think of that? Huh? Pogo-initis? No, you didn't. Look that up, did they? Over the years I've had some pretty jobs, but nothing as as this one. Literally. Sire, would you like fronteth to backeth or backeth to fronteth today, sire? That's right, there was a job for that. People had to have had started wiping at some point, right? But who exactly and when? The groom of the stool. Chief gentlewoman of the privy chamber. Call it whatever you like, we know what they did. So what exactly did they wipe with? Well, usually hay, sticks, fur, or even seashells. Every single one of those sounds itchy and terrible. I know what Charmin can do sometimes, and I can't imagine what a piece of oak could have done back then. Was there splinter taker-outers as well? I can't help but feel, although how painful and stinky it was, I'm sure there was at least one shared laugh, a little quality time spent with some royalty to say the least. Although this career is speculated, both King Charles I and King James I had them, so unless they decided they wanted to do that after them, someone must have continued doing it. I hope for a pretty penny at least. Those waste management dudes have pretty good benefits. Filing your taxes looking for a job description? Yes, here it is, wiper. Number 8, bad teeth. If you've had a couple root canals like me and enjoy the taste and feel of your tongue ripped to shreds after a big old bag of sours, well, then this one's for you. Opposed to the nice clean white smile we all strive for today, back then the sight of bad teeth was actually, well, charming. It usually meant you had a lot of money. Those disgusting peasants and their hygiene. Teeth have a lifespan on their own, and the white discoloration from poor hygiene happens to all of us on its own. But the best method and the fastest method to ensure that those little chompers become stinky and brown, sugar. Which, if you were living anywhere between the 12th and 19th century, was very expensive and really hard to come by. So why the fashion craze? Well, it's got multiple purposes. For instance, in Southeast Asian cultures, blackening one's teeth, or the Japanese Uhaguro, was seen as both a beauty standard and a tooth preserver. This process would happen by coating the teeth in a mixture of goop, usually made out of iron, vinegar, and vegetable tannin to dye the teeth black. Queen Elizabeth is a great example of this beauty standard. She would basically just smash a sugar goop into her mouth every day to purposely destroy her teeth. The more infected and discolored the teeth, the better. Ew.
Number 7, propeller hats. Okay, I'm coming for hats in this video, it seems. Sorry about that. Propeller hats in Super Mario, very practical. A lot of Goombas, sudden gusts of wind, plus a few warp pipes. You're gonna need a lift or two, right? Fair. The summer of 1947, not that windy folks. Not windy enough for propeller hats, I'll tell you that for free. Why are teens in the 40s wearing airport runway anemone eaters on their heads? Why? We don't need to know the wind velocity outside, just go eat some ice cream. Well, it started with a cartoonist named Ray Faraday Nelson. See, he used this propeller hat in a cartoon, and then later on at a sci-fi convention, he had the cartoon there with a real-life propeller hat. And everyone was like, what, how? How did he just do that? This of course swept the nation, just like the fidget spinner. Brands made their own versions, they hopped on the trend quickly, so quick in fact that Nelson never had time to even secure a patent for this new, fresh idea. Yeah, it was too late. He didn't get a dime from the hats, and we didn't get the gift of solo flight, so let's call it even, Ray.
Number 6. Ruffs. With silken coats and caps and golden rings, with ruffs and cuffs and farthingales and things. Taming of the Shrew, Act 4, Scene 3. Ah yes, the theatre and the ruff. Well, not that rough, but quite literally theatre in a ruff. A ruff, I sound like a dog. A ruff, or also known as the Elizabethan collar, was an interchangeable piece of cloth that could itself be laundered separately while keeping the wearer's gown from not being soiled at the neckline. Long story short, no Chef Boyardee spilling out of your mouth and down onto your clothes. Hey, that's a good idea. The stiffness of the garment forced upright posture and poise. Most ruffs could only be worn once due to its longevity and structure. Made out of a very fine material like silk, their light and delicate material, design, and size led them to become a symbol of wealth and status amongst the upper class. There was even a time where blue dyed ruffs were against the law in England, since it resembled Scotland's colours on its flag. It shall only be of 2 primary colours, yellow and blood. Or red. Red.
Number 5. Smoke break jackets. Here we go. Hey, remember Hugh Hefner? Yeah, not only did he treat women like shit, but he also dressed like it completely. Yeah, rather fitting if you ask me. Guy would wear a stinky maroon colored jacket and then sit there and blow smoke in your face all night. What an icon. Guy changed history. He would wear what's called a smoking jacket. That's what this garbage is. They were around in the 1600s, but they really peaked popularity in the 1920s, when Hugh was like 56 years old, you know what I mean? These jackets were designed for gentlemen, I mean obviously, you know, they were designed as bathrobes with class. They were made of this velvet cloth, perfect for soaking up cigar smoke and further accusations. God rest his soul. He really left his mark in history, didn't he?
Number 4. Corsets. Okay, we know literally everything about these things, but you don't, so listen up. If you have to put your foot in the middle of my back to lace me up, yeah, it's too tight. Or is it? A stiff and rigid piece of clothing that I could definitely use for my posture. The corset, first invented in Italy, then France, then England, the rigid posture and protective garment around the kidneys, ribs, and vital organs under a knight's armor were adopted for style, class, and shape. Most popularized during the 16th century, this slim and sleek look was adored and worn by all classes. The best way for a woman to shape her bust, a man's chest straight and high while riding, and a great way to lose consciousness.
No, I can breathe. Go a bit tighter. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Usually made out of something strong like whalebone or wood. The stitched corsets would maintain its hard shape and the wearer would basically just be stitched in for the entirety of the day. That sounds comfortable.
Number 3. Hammer pants. Okay, look, Kyle and I were on a dance team or two growing up, we get it. Baggy pants, extra zippers that don't even have pockets that are far too shallow to hold even that of a chapstick. We get it, okay? We love a good pair of dance pants. The Hammer pants from the 90s, I don't think that was it. We should have heeded MC Hammer's warning and not touched it, you know what I mean? The man turned 60 this year, so we have to now look back on the truth. From him. MC Hammer himself has made it very clear. He says, quote, "Don't call them parachute pants. I detest the term." End quote. Yeah, man of few words, but you know what? When you sing that many songs, you don't need to speak anymore. Obviously, MC Hammer didn't invent this style, but it's funny to see him act like he did. You know what I mean? These types of trousers initially appeared in Persia, India, and Turkey thousands of years ago, but we love your bangers, MC Hammer. All 3.
Number 2. Belladonna drops. Growing up with bad vision, I've had some pretty weird things shoved into my eyes. Dirty fingers, drops, but never a scoop of berry jam. Nah, I kinda missed out on that one, I guess. Okay, maybe not jam, but The belladonna berries, though very toxic, had an unusual role in beauty standards in medieval Europe. Upon squishing this doughy-eyed remedy into your sockets, the person's, usually women's eyes, would dilate, resulting in huge, doughy puppy dog eyes, just running around town with blurred vision like you're about to get ophthalmologisted. EML49 strawberry, raspberry, blueberry, that's not, okay, what? Of course, you wouldn't be able to see how good you looked per se, as if you've ever been dilated for optometrist reasons, then you know exactly what I mean. The belladonna or beautiful woman drops got you running into walls every 2 seconds, but boy oh boy does she look beautiful.
Number 1. Paper dresses. This short-lived fad was introduced in the 1960s. It was a good one. It was exactly what you think. Paper dresses. Nice. Paper Mario in real life. Finally, I've always wanted this. I could already feel the paper cuts. What a nightmare this ought to be. Here we go. Paper dresses to go. That was the phrase they like to use. They said the word go twice, therefore must be a good product. The Scott Paper Company made these not expecting the reaction that it got. It caught on quickly, of course. It only took 6 months for this casual paper company to start selling more than 500,000 paper dresses. Just out of nowhere, they're like, let's just try this, and then it worked. It went so well that other companies hopped on board, just like the Propeller Hats. Over $3 million were spent on this awful fad. Andy Warhol was even in on the mix. It was a big deal. Everybody wanted to be involved. They weren't made of flimsy printer paper. It wasn't as bad as I'm making it sound, but it certainly wasn't great either. The dress was made of disposable material called Duraweave, before it was cool to make things out of disposable materials. Believe it or not, it was slightly water and slightly fire resistant. Unlike those puffy middle-aged dresses that immediately go whoom, and then they don't exist anymore. This one was a little bit better. Took the flame a little bit of time, right? It's been compared to the thick paper bib that you get at the dentist. Yeah, that horrible material that bunches up and pokes your neck mid-root canal while Kyle's doing stuff? It's made of that. Fun. We love history. We love beautiful fashion history.
Number 10. The corset. As women began to increase their mobility both socially and literally, the only word left for the binding implement was a muttered dye. Seriously, these things sucked to wear. I've actually had the misfortune of wearing something similar back in my theater days, and I really don't recommend it. Interestingly, it wasn't a complete murder of the implement, as designers worked out different types of corsets designed for particular activities. The dance corset being one of them, and another being the maternity corset. I'm probably not the first to say this, but don't wear a corset if you're pregnant. As a result, the total ownership of corsets did increase due to the variety that was suddenly available. Despite this, the tides were clearly shifting against the corset, and it wouldn't be long before the implementation of the garment went the way of the dinosaur. Number 9. Raising the skirt line. If you're Amish, best look away now. Yes, well, the previous decade saw a mass flourish in the extravagance of the dress. The increased mobility thing I mentioned earlier meant that women more than likely found themselves a little sick of tripping over their clothes. As a result, the skirt line began to lift, and the overall ensemble of skirt and underskirt was dropped in favor of just simplification. While normally this would have been met with outrage, the interesting component lies in how these trends were framed. See, these women weren't just being scandalous, they were being patriotic and practical. In wartime, this distinction was wide enough that the usual voices were uncommonly silent. This could also be attributed with the rumblings of the dance craze, the sudden need to go out and move requiring clothes that, didn't eat your feet.
Number 8. Sunglasses. This bright invention was first created in the 12th century China. This rough, heavy slab of carved quartz was first used in an attempt to block the sun's powerful rays while being able to protect the face and eyes. These glasses didn't have ear rods and were just held up against the face. The Inuit of North Canada have something like this as well, made out of bone or a piece of wood, carved with slits cut out of it for the eyes to see into the bright snow. The smoky glass texture of the quartz allowed the person to see through the glasses and have the rays refracted through the dark color. See, I said refracted, lots of scientific words, you know what I mean? Basically, they were just experimenting with different smoky rocks and gems in front of their face until James Aschkow started making way with tinted lenses in the 18th century. The rich were wearing more and more shades until about 1939 when Ray-Ban made the aviator polarized lenses and the shades were forever changed. First pair sold for $5. 40 days to carve and polish for $5, huh? It's not a bad deal.
Number 7. Big foreheads. Here we go. This one's for the ladies. Nice. Hit that thumbs up for this big old forehead, this bright forehead. You can see the lights off. If I stand here, that's the forehead light right here. Elizabethan foreheads, yes. Here's one I can finally lean into. My family called me a 5-head growing up. Little did they know I would have cleaned up shop back in the 1600s. Here we go. Plucking your hairline was a sign of beauty back in the day. How amazing is that? I mean, it still is today, but it's different, right? We're kind of pulling back. We're like, you know what? No, I don't want to pluck anything anymore. It hurts. I'm done. More often than not, women in the Renaissance era wore restrictive upper body clothing. The ideal look back then was flat-chested and hair plucked back, like you're a goddamn chicken. I can't even pluck this unibrow thing that I have going on here. I just shave it. I give up. Plucking hurts. I'm just gonna shave this one spot for the rest of my life. So, mad respect to the pluckers out there. Pain is beauty, I guess. Ice Road pluckers.
Number 6, cowboy hats. Well, howdy, partner. Made most popular by horse riders, farmers, and your buddy named Dougie, the cowboy hat or cavalry hat has been around for quite a long time. First started with the Mongolian riders and then taken on new shapes and forms throughout history as the wide-brimmed hat. The cowboy hat is back and popularized in southern states around the early 1800s. Made out of literally any material from straw to felt, this large crown, large brimmed hat kept the sun out of your face and off your body. Hey, sun safety. It resembles the sombrero from the early Mexican use and influence. These things have been around for centuries and are still thriving. I mean, just go to any Kenny Chesney concert, you'll find about 100 on the ground after the concert. Just pick one up, put it on your head, free. Some have strings, some have feathers. The cowboy hat has made its place in fashion and practically yeehaw forever. That's a terrible joke.
Number 5, bliats. Heading back to the 12th century for this gem. European men and women both rock this look, okay? Of course, sleeves that droop down all the way to the floor. Who wouldn't want a piece of that action? Walking around all slow like this for no reason? We've seen Lord of the Rings. Imagine walking around in a castle with one of these playfully just dragging behind you as you emerge from the cellar on a full moon night. Oh, my majesty. I'm gonna faint thinking about it. That's easy. Man, we need bliats back today. I wish I had a couple bliats for prom. I wouldn't have even had to ask her to dance. I would just stick my bliats out and then a queen would accompany me. Just like that, voila. The roots for this dazzling look go back to the French Germanic origins. The word translates to our modern day use of blouse because it was the same light, ghosty material. Yeah, imagine attending a meeting in a bliat blouse made of silk. Immediate write-up, so fast.
Number 4, the bikini. I don't know why, but for some reason in every picture as a kid I'm running around in a sexy black Speedo. You know the deal. No shorts, just thong on cheeks. I was always embarrassed by the lack of clothing and felt vulnerable, but learned growing up that that's fashion, baby. Sometimes you feel a little uncomfortable. The bikini, a controversial and even at many times illegal piece of clothing, is a piece of fashion that has been around as early as 5600 BC, and the history of the bikini can be traced back to that era. Carvings and paintings of women wearing bikini-like garments during the competitive athletic events in Rome have been found in several locations. Most of the time worn by women, the bikini went through a ton of design. Two-piece bathing suits have been seen all over the world, so what's the problem? Well, it's illegal in certain places and illegal now, still. Inappropriate use of showing off one's body could be a crime around the early 1900s. Police would just walk around the beach and measure the length of a two-piece bathing suit. You have the right to remain silent, anything you do or say. The 30s and the 40s, it's still pretty exotic and people were kind of shady about the idea of revealing so much skin. The 40s and the 50s comes around, starts to become a little bit more Hollywoodized, and then the 60s and 70s, it's on every magazine in America. The two-piece bikini is worn today and is a symbol of confidence and sexuality. How much do you think they go for?
Number 3, moon boots. Unless you're Link from the past and or future, you're not pulling off a pair of moon boots, okay? Sorry to burst your bubble. Back in the late 60s, these hot and heavy pieces of footwear were the hottest trend in town for some reason. Yeah, winter boots all year round. We love it. Fashion. But yeah, welcome to Canada. Also, we wear these 11 months out of the year. It sucks. My ankles are always hurting. Moon boots originally appeared in 1969 in Italy, and it was part of a ski wear collection, but add a little Apollo 11 moon landing into the mix, now we have a fashion trend in history. Now we all think we're astronauts and we're dragging our feet to the club in the middle of July. Once space became old news, so did the Apollo boots, sadly. We've seen these bad boys appear in modern history. Chanel, Jeremy Scott, big names are still trying to bring back the moon boots. Let's bring back the moon shoes. How about that? How about a functioning pair of those? Remember the commercial? Kid jumps, grabs an apple, lands. Just false advertising at its best.
Number 2, high heels. The high-heeled shoe or high heels, or simply known as "where's my heels?" have been a piece of fashion since the early 10th century. The design raises the heel of the wearer's foot significantly higher off the ground than the wearer's toes, causing the wearer's legs to appear longer, make the wearer appear taller, and accentuate muscle tones in the wearer's legs. It's all about the calves nowadays, man, all about the calves. Typically seen as a men's garment until the mid-1500s, the high heel is a staple in today's fashion, as its design and functionality hasn't changed in almost 1,000 years. King Louis XIV of France made heels a standard and would have himself hundreds of pairs of gemstones, lavishly precious metal-lined high heels, basically just one of the Kardashians' closets. But as we all know, pain is beauty, and these nasty things really f up your feet. Due to the structure of the high heel, this piece of fashion could be the most harmful to our bodies. Just shoving your size 8s in a sexy size 5 crumpled up like Play-Doh all night? Yeah, that's definitely gonna do it.
And finally, number 1, painted veins. Hey, from one pale human being to another, I have no idea where this came from. I don't get it. I don't see it at all, really. Back in the 1800s, you only had 2 looks to choose from, really. There was painted or natural. See, natural was light on the makeup, as you'd guess by its name, but painted, well, they meant that in a literal sense. This more vibrant look required actual paint, just lead-based paint. And the most important part of applying all this is you can't move or smile. Yeah, any emotion will cause the paint to crack. That's why all these paintings are so serious. 4 more hours? 4 hours? Okay. Madame X, the portrait, the famous portrait, originally painted back in 1884. At first, her straps were slipping off her shoulder, right? A little, right? But that was deemed too scandalous for the upper class society around the painting at that time, so John had to repaint the straps back on. What a joke! He's like, okay, too sexy? Okay, straps are on, there we go, we're fixed. Backlash was still so strong after John had sold the painting because her skin was so pale and you could see her veins. They were like, oh, too much, I can see through you, what the hell? Just no winning back in the 1800s, eh? Can't have spaghetti straps, can't have veins. Wait till Playboy comes out, you guys are gonna
Number 10, tulle skirts. Tulle skirts were a major problem. Although these were chiefly worn by ballerinas, ballet has always been a destructive form of dance when it comes to basically how it affects the body. I mean, many ballerinas literally have their toenails fall off as a result of dancing on point. That's just kind of like an assumed part of the profession if you're dancing point. However, we aren't even talking about the feet here. We're actually talking about how safe the costumes are, the literal garments they dance around in, not even their shoes or their feet. The answer to that question? They're not very safe. Considering that before electricity many danced on candlelit stages, you'd likely be horrified to hear just how flammable these costumes were. There are many examples throughout history of ballerinas and dancers getting too close to candle flames while in their costumes and basically lighting on fire. And I gotta say, I've listened to multiple podcasts that have talked about this, so I could recommend some to you. If you want some, let me know in the comments, I'll send them your way. Emma Livry is by far one of the most famous ballerinas though to have caught flame. She actually did initially survive the incident, but she died 8 months later as a result of her injuries. That sounds terrible. And there were honestly countless others who suffered similar fates. The really terrible thing is, back in the day, this is something new that I found out, we actually had the means to make fire retardant costumes, but they affected the aesthetic of the costumes, making the costumes appear a little bit more stiff. So rather than try to save the more than thousands of ballerinas who died in even just a single year, we decided to opt for beauty over safety. To me, that's pretty scandalous, I'm gonna be honest. Scandalous and disappointing. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Bumblebee and you love learning history with us, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button. Honestly, we got a lot of fun facts for you and I don't want you to miss out. Number 9, showing some shoulder. Ooh. The crazy thing is we actually just came from an era before this when showing shoulders was actually considered very fashionable. But by the time the Victorian era really started to kick into gear, this was actually considered completely improper. Paintings even had to be repainted to reflect this new trend because showing a bit of shoulder literally frightened some people. They were like, oh, I can't look at it. Repaint that painting. Cover those shoulders up. I'm not joking, that's a real thing. And don't even get me started on cleavage. Shoulders were previously considered to be something beautifully showcased from gowns that had both lower and wider necklines. This was considered beautiful and sexy in a good way. But with puritanical views taking over, anything considered too beautiful and definitely anything considered sexy would be seen as bad and sinful. So we had to cover those shoulders up. Man, if I traveled back to the Victorian era right now, they'd be like, girl, what you doing with those shoulders? Sorry. My shoulders and my ankles are out today. Oh, scandalous.
Number 8. Chatelaines. These practical and very decorative accessories have been used since the 18th and 19th centuries. A deadly yet decorative fashion ending in the Victorian era. Typically a chain made of metal, usually silver, bronze, or brass, and hung from the waistband, riddled with tools and trinkets, attached to it for your everyday use. Cobblers would have cobbler stuff, dentists would have dentist stuff. Basically this is just a cool belt chain on your jeans. Like a giant multi-tool on a keychain. Everything from vials with smelling salts, whistles, to even knives and protective devices. Just a giant set of janitor keys with different tools on it. I feel like this definitely gave way to the Swiss Army knife. Flathead or Robinson. Oh, I got a Phillips if you need. A Phillips? Yeah, go ahead. It was mobile, decorative, and personal. I'm surprised we don't have these right now. I mean, I would use it. Mine would have like 11 chapsticks on it, just all in a row, you know? Number 7, cloaks. These mobile sleeping bags have been worn as far back as ancient Greece and ancient Mesopotamia. Made out of anything from fur to wool, these usually neck to foot length portable blankets were seen as both practical and decorative. One of the most used and reused clothing technologies. I can understand why such a simple piece of material can be used for so many different things. Protect you from most elements, camouflage you when hiding, and you could pretty much make these yourselves. Some people added hoods and pockets to theirs. Harry Potter gets it, Batman gets it. These people got it. Cloaks, capes, magicians' uniforms, we still use these things to this day. We gotta bring these back with youngins, just Dracula cape someone on an exit. I mean, that's like the new mic drop. Yeah, I'll see you this weekend. Number 6, togas. Much like the cloak, a very simple and ageless garment. A loose-fitting sheet typically wrapped and folded across a person's body, seen as far back and popularized by ancient Romans. These common eggshell white dresses were used as general garb by both men and women of all classes. Think about how much red wine they would spill on these. Apparently they were big drinkers back then. Sorry, do you have any club soda? Yeah, just don't dab it, please, just blot it, thank you. And these things were huge too. You almost always needed help wrapping yourself up like a burrito. Hurry up. Usually young boys would wear purple until they were a man. If you were mourning, then you would wear dark colors, and if you were in state, you would have the typical white toga, possibly with some colorful embroidery for some class. Pretty easy, you have like 3 choices. No more throwing clothes on and on before school. No, not that, I wore that last week. Can I see the white again? This garment was eventually abandoned by women, and then the lower class, and then the upper class, and then eventually men just really wore them at frat parties. Toga! Toga! Yo, Raven Romulus, bro, they're nuts, man. Number 5, Cricaus. A popular shoe first originating in what is now Poland, the Cricaus gets its name from exactly this place, Cricaus. Or also known as poulain shoes, were worn from roughly the 13th century to the 17th century by men and women of all classes. Multi-sizable, the long pointed shoe would have been sewn to a point and just rounded at the tip. The first use, of course, was merely decorative, stuffed at the toes with usually moss or hay. As time went on, the fashion trend took off and more people were just designing long, stinky socks. Just 1420 muddy England with no arch support, slipping and sliding all over the streets. How bad did they smell too? No socks, just foot on shoe rubbing? And you know they weren't clipping those toenails. I bet they were just curled up underneath them. Ew. I guess these would have been good for all shoe sizes. Kind of like a one shoe fits all, your whole life kind of deal. Typically made out of wool or leather, these could be also crafted into metal and fitted for a night. Like swords aren't scary enough, now I gotta dodge your pointy knife boot attack? Aha! Number 4, powdered wigs. The powdered wig, or periwig, most famously coined after Louis XIV, started this up and coming trend. As far back as the 1600s, we've seen these paintings of men and women with huge white hairdos. You're thinking, that's a lot of hairspray and a lot of stress. Well, actually it wasn't even their hair. In fact, most men and women were balding underneath during these times. Yeah. Syphilis, good one. Syphilis was the most popular of STDs, and one of the common side effects was patchy balding hair, also blisters, and also sores. With the plague constantly knocking on the door, cleanliness and class was upheld in values more than anything. The powder, consisting mostly of starch and lavender, was used to powder wigs and rid them of odors, stains, and even bugs? Dude, I'm getting itchy reading this. That's right, a ton of bugs, usually in the form of lice, would be attracted to these wigs, and most of the time were infested even before their first wear. Worn by all classes, the powdered wig is an icon in fashion. It's used through so many centuries by so many different people. Just coughing non-stop while shaving your head so you don't get fleas, shaking the ants out of your head before the big dance. The common price for a decent wig would cost about a week's worth of wages. Of course, the upper class spending much higher price for larger and better quality pieces, coining the term big wigs. The rich and their bad hair pieces. Like, it's jet black, you're 89, dude, let it go! Number 3. Chainmail. Worn from 3rd century BC to about 16th century AD, historians point us in the direction of Celtics in Europe for the initial use and design of this shiny metal shirt. From the word burnie, the chainmail is one of the most widely known lightweight mobile armors people could really wear for one's safety. One of the most useful and practical sets of wardrobe designed for mostly military personnel, the chainmail, or commonly known as mail, was a lattice grid consisting of tightly fitted metal loops to form an almost knitted poncho. Hood, sleeve, you name it, they made it. This item of clothing would be custom fitted to your body and worn all day. I bet you'd be pretty tired because most of the time, a full jumper of mail was about 50 pounds. In the rain and the mud. That's heavy. And in the rain too? Like, did they ever get electrocuted? You're basically a giant metal golf club on top of a castle fighting with sharper metal golf clubs. Zeus just chucking thunderbolts down at you and you're just trying to keep your head up. Number 2. Cod pieces. Jock, dance belt, the old stuff the sock trick. These guys did it first. And I say guys because, guys, men definitely created this. Yeah, I'll take the bigger size. The big one. Hurry up, please. Hurry up! Size mattered back then, and size of one's cod mattered. A piece of fashion designed for both safety and for boasting. Getting dressed was hard back then, and you didn't want to get your bits all caught up in any material. So the answer was the 15th century cod piece, made out of metal, wood, or leather. The cod piece was fitted around a man's stuff and securely tied to his waist belt or pantaloons, either under or over his clothes. Some believe this was designed due to the waistlines rising and the shortening of one's jacket over the years, revealing more and more of the goods. Sometimes to show off, sometimes for battle, and much like the modern jock, it did serve numerous protection reasons, but was mostly seen at the time as a fashion statement. Again, size and reputation mattered, and flaunting was all part of the 15th, 16th century culture. Louis XIV knows what's up. And step will change, sire. And number 1, macaroni. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Yeah, that's a real song, dude. I thought my neighbor Declan made that up playing road hockey when I was 8. Near the end of the 18th century, at one of Europe's most heightened times, also known as the Age of Enlightenment, was an eclectic group of people called the Macaronis. No, not the delicious noodle, but instead a group of young men flamboyantly pushing the boundaries of fashion to even trolling it. Huh. These men were mocking a style, and in that, created another style. Yeah, that's pretty gangster, dude. Basically, you would wear the biggest wig you had, and on top, a tiny miniature hat and a feather. Just a cute little guy. Someone was definitely trying to make their friend laugh, and then it just worked. This high slang term for high fashion is thought to have originated from the elegantly dressed Italian immigrants, elegantly noted Italian men boasting about how perfect their macaroni pasta was and throwing about the term for everything they liked or adored as macaroni. Wow, I love your shoes, they're so macaroni. Yeah, your hair's like so macaroni. It's like really macaroni, you know what I mean? The sillier and more elegant and more vibrant, the better. Men would have to walk around with ceiling-high wigs, the balance alone. Oh, okay, there we go. It was a time to show off. And the coolest part? Macaroni style was genderless. Men and women could borrow and mix match styles at this point in history, and people were digging it. It was like the 80s of the century. Well, I guess that's literally the 80s at some point. Vibrant colors, glitz and glamour, you name it, they wore it. And that's why I feel the Macaronis deserve the #1 spot here. Just the name alone, man, come on. And number 10, leather jackets. I just had to say that cool, I felt like I needed to. Okay, so how did we get from prehistoric leather to grease lightning? This warm, durable piece of clothing has been popular for many eras, but now where did it all start? Well, firstly on the animal. The leather jacket we're used to seeing is based off the World War I jackets. That's right, German pilots wore these brown, thick leather jackets in their planes before the cooler, sleeker bomber jacket was born. From the early 1900s, we see the leather jacket really start to take off with more military use in World War II, now worn by all sides. Irvin Schott's initial design was created in 1928 and widely used by military motorcycle personnel. He named the first one the Perfecto, after his favorite cigar company. It wasn't until the 1950s and 60s where we see this garment take on a sense of actual fashion, with studs like McQueen and Brando repping the look in Hollywood movies, and well, there it took off. Punks in the 70s and 80s, women, men, these are all everywhere now. Of course, the faux leather has also made its way into life now with the abuse and cruelty of animals. I'm all here for it, not judging. It comes in literally every size and color, and you can literally buy a leather jacket anywhere you go.
Number 9. Lash lure. Turning the calendars back to 1933, the year FM radios and drive-in movie theaters changed the world as we know it. Right on. I love both of those things. Still, so much, for sure. See, not all inventions in 1933 were family friendly. Some of them were quite deadly. Like the one-of-a-kind mascara, Lash Lure. Here we go, to lure you right in, easy peasy. This 1930s cosmetic contained a chemical called p-phenylethylamine. I can't even say it, that's how you know it's bad, right? This mascara left blisters all over your face. It wasn't working, the chemicals didn't react properly for some cases, and it was horrible. Now, eventually, in 1933, there was sadly a death. One woman sadly developed an infection, a bacterial infection, and ultimately passed away because of said mascara. That same year, the before and after photos were used in an FDA display titled The Chamber of Horrors. Yeah, it was a horrible incident, but it got the attention from higher-ups. Lash Lure was the first product in history that was ever removed from stores. There's a little dark fun fact for you. I guess the display at the old Chamber of Horrors did the trick. Lord, we're in the middle of something similar now though, aren't we? Cigarette packages have those horrible side effects to smoking images right there on the package, you know? The chick on the cover looks like a demigorgon from Stranger Things. You're like, ugh, I'm all set. I'm just gonna fidget spin this. That's horrible. Number 8, hobble skirts. In the early 20th century, hobble skirts were the talk of the town. Everybody hobbled like a penguin. It was so odd, but they looked great, gotta admit. They looked so sophisticated. The skirts were introduced around 1910 and they were characterized, of course, by their narrow and constricting design, tightly hugging the legs, restricting movement, and creating a hobbling effect. Seen as a symbol of elegance, of course, hobble skirts embodied the desire for a sleek silhouette and the allure of the fashionable Gibson girl image, right? That image does not come to life. It stays like this all day. You cannot walk. However, their impracticality and potential hazards, such as difficulty in walking and navigating any and all staircase, that eventually led to their decline by the mid-1910s. But I don't know, should we bring these ones back? Imagine being at prom, you're walking around in one of those, you look great. You look great, you don't have to dance with anyone, you're just doing your own thing. Number 7, crinolines. Also known as hoop skirts, here we go. These ones here presented the opposite problem as the hobble skirt. Now you're the size of a minivan. There you go, good luck. The hoop skirt emerged as a prominent fashion trend in the mid-19th century. These structured undergarments, typically made of, check this out, steel or whalebone, or both, one of the either, RIP ankles. These steel frames would be covered in fabric and then worn underneath women's dresses to create this large, attention-grabbing, bell-shaped silhouette. You look like a boss from the game Cuphead. A really hard boss. So many layers you gotta through. These skirts would enhance the desired hourglass figure, right? You'd look great, you'd have that whole thing going. However, their size and heavy frame posed challenges in movement, led to occasional accidents, of course. You're trying to dance with young Shelly here, and her steel dress nicks you, gives you tetanus. Now you gotta go home and figure that out. Good luck. Everybody loses. This one sucked. Number 6, bombast. Mr. Bombastic, what is he doing right now, you know? This one here is my least favorite. This one makes me so itchy to talk about. I was typing this and scratching all my To bombast oneself. Sounds like you've died and then something happens. What did that mean back in the 16th century? Well, this flamboyant style, popular among the upper class, of course, involved an extreme amount of padding inserted into clothing to create exaggerated proportions. You look like a big Shrek guy. This style was heavy in the sleeves of both men and women's garments alike, and it was intricate layers of fabric that were supported by stuffing made of horsehair, wool, and sawdust. Horrible things you want to put on your persons. They would stuff their clothes with sawdust and wool. It's like they want lice. It's like they're inviting lice in and bugs just to come and live with them. God, I feel so sick. I gotta move on. Number 5, corsets. I'm gonna hold my breath for this entire one. Originating in the Renaissance period, corsets were structured undergarments designed to shape and support one's upper figure. Hopefully, for a bit, they would enhance your natural curves. Now, as centuries passed, corsets evolved in style and construction. Add a couple more laces, squeeze a little tighter, see what happens. However, their restrictive nature and health concerns eventually led to a shift in fashion ideals. Thank God. Yeah, people back then were passing out. They were experiencing internal organ problems. Your body can't be bunched up like that for years at a time. Your organs are not a fan of that. Waistline looks great, but your spine is misaligned, so... Number 4. Bustles. This one here is my absolute favorite. I feel like we're slowly coming back to the bustle trend, just in a different way, with different materials, if you catch my drift. During the Victorian era, the bustle emerged as a prominent, I didn't want to say a fashion trend, it was more of like a chore that you had to continuously keep up. At first we had it tight, and then we just let it all go right in the back, right there in the I'm on board with this one, I'm not gonna lie. Bustles were introduced in the late 19th century, and a bustle was a padded or structured undergarment worn at the back of a woman's skirt. Just there, not up here, no big giant arms, just all in the ass, that's it. Its purpose was to create a protrusion and enhance the appearance of a fuller, more rounded, thick with 2 Ks posterior, right? And it worked. Look at these. Bustles varied in size and shape, ranging from modest padding to Victorian Kardashian levels. Really, it's all up to you. Get creative. Everybody's so creative, right? Number 3. Bloomer suit. In the 1850s, a new and, dare I say, controversial garment known as the bloomer suit. These are all fucking tongue twisters, man. In the 1850s, a new and, dare I say, controversial garment known as the bloomer suit, I can't say this, I'm gonna have troubles with this, the bloomer suit. This new suit emerged as a symbol of women's liberation and reform, and it looked pretty sick. It looked very cozy compared to everything else on this list. It was named after Amelia Bloomer herself, a prominent advocate for women's rights, and the bloomer suit consisted of loose trousers gathered at the ankles, and it was worn under a knee-length skirt. I want to wear this to work tomorrow, some smooth criminal vibes coming in. The bloomer suit was designed for practicality and freedom of movement, which is nice with, again, what I just listed. It challenged the restrictive fashion norms at the time. This changed the game. These suits were associated with progressive ideals, promoting women's rights, gender equality, and the rejection of traditional feminine attire, like whalebone suits and shit to make you pass out. While the bloomer suit eventually fell out of fashion, its legacy as a symbol of women's empowerment, of course, continues. I want to wear one of these. I'm just gonna wear a suit under this hoodie, see what happens. Number 2, the bliot. I've been playing lots of Elden Ring, so I'm a big fan of this one here. This one's good. Ooh, my God, look at those elbows right there. That's so magical. The bliot was a hot garment back in the 12th and 13th centuries. They held cultural significance in medieval Europe. Again, a lot of wizard vibes coming from this one. It was a loose-fitting dress, typically made of luxurious fabrics and adorned with intricate embroidery, and it was worn by both men, women, and wizards. Yeah, all 3, you name it. The bliot accentuated the natural curves of the body and symbolized wealth. But most importantly, it featured long, trailing wizard sleeves, often exaggerated in length and width, going to the floor, again, real wizard-like. And ideally, these sleeves would add an element of grace and elegance. You'd have to walk around with your elbows up like this. It'd be pretty exhausting, if I'm being honest. As fashion evolved, the bliot gradually gave way to more fitted and structured garments. You know what? I'm gonna bring it back. I'm gonna show up to work tomorrow wearing one of these. You gotta walk so slow if you wear one. I'm gonna be so late, so holy-like. And finally, number 1. Paris green. Not to be confused with Paris Hilton, a vibrant green pigment, yeah, we're gonna end on one of these, gained popularity during the Victorian era despite its hidden dangers. Paris green was composed of copper acetoarsenite, and it was extensively used as a colorant in wallpapers, fabrics, and cosmetics. This shit was everywhere. Saved it for last because it was literally all over the place. It was horrible. Very dangerous. Its toxic nature posed serious health risks. Long-term exposure to Paris green caused symptoms ranging from skin irritation to, I don't know, organ failure. So somewhere along those lines, you'll end up. Good luck. It earned the sinister nickname Invisible Killer. So yeah, you know when you're painting, we actually used it for this green screen right here. It's Paris green right there. It's believed that countless individuals suffered unknowingly from the effects of this pigment. Eventually, the awareness of its toxicity led to its decline in usage, and now it serves as a cautionary tale of the hazards hidden beneath the allure of fashion and design in the Victorian era. Back then, everything was so bad for you, and they're like, yeah, let's put it on our eyes and see what happens. Why not? Fashion.